Recent financial results out of the South African banking sector shows that many consumers remained under significant financial pressure despite early signs of an economic recovery. With the number of distressed properties currently going up for auction, there may be opportunities for savvy property investors to get their hands on quality properties at great prices. However, the auction industry has been plagued with a lot of negative press, and it's not a place for the inexperienced. So let's take a look at what you need to consider before buying a property on auction. Joining us for this discussion, still with me at the desk, Tandisizwe, Mahlutshana, Jessica Hubbard, Faclier, Managing Director for Property at GoIndustry Dovebid, South Africa, and Ariella Kuper, Managing Director and co-founder of Clear Asset. They're both joining us from our Cape Town studios. Kim, I'll start off with you. Just give us an idea right now as to how the auction industry is doing right now in South Africa. And of course, when I say auction, I'm talking about the property market specifically.
Well, the property market has definitely seen a slowdown in comparison to how things were a while ago. There definitely has been a negative perception in the market, but there are certainly opportunities for the astute buyers. And with regard to buying online or on site, you definitely need to do your homework quite substantially. So it's always about being prepared, getting your ducks in a row, obtaining the sufficient funding and the correct funding, doing a proper due diligence, and then obviously being prepared on the actual auction day.
Ariella, just to labour on this point about the slowdown, has it been tied necessarily to the negative press around the auction industry?
When you talk about, sorry, just to address that, Samantha, you're asking the negative slowdown with regards to people now looking to buy properties because there's more available due to defaults and people looking to free up working capital. Is that the question you're asking?
No, just specifically, I mean, the slowdown that we've seen in the auction property space, is that tied directly to the negative press that it's received?
Samantha, I think to respond to that question, and I'd like to actually say that I'm not active in the property field any longer. I'm active in mining, where I focus on online auctions, and I think that's where I'd like to leave my expertise. But with regards to the property, I think that auctions are a forum where there's an opportunity for people to buy limited stock that caters specifically to investors. You will always find appetite. So if you're looking at commercial properties where there is finite opportunity with specific yields and position that is offering an investor, there will always be demand, and I think that's where the auction forum lends itself ideally. Kim, perhaps you want to comment further on that?
No, I agree with that. I mean, sought after properties from a commercial perspective and just from a real estate perspective, depending on the tenant mix, depending on the length of leases, depending on the location, there is going to be an appetite. But as I said previously, astute buyers are going to be a lot more conservative, do substantial homework pertaining to the properties, get the relative funding in place, and then make a concise decision based on those numbers. The distressed market, there are a lot more properties coming on stream from the banks. You're talking billions of rands worth of properties being held by the 4 major financial institutions or banking institutions, and these are slowly coming to the fore, which presents an opportunity for the sophisticated buyer.
Kim, this is Jessica speaking. I'd just like to ask you, when you say do your homework, what are the specific things that buyers looking at auction opportunities should be looking at? Are there specific mistakes, or are there common mistakes that buyers often make, particularly first-time buyers?
Well, I think, you know, with regard to anything, depending on what you're looking to purchase, everybody needs to do their homework and they need to be prepared. So, you know, when an online auction, when the time frame comes to the deadline, or you're at a live auction, you're in the heat of the moment, people sometimes get carried away. You need to commit to a specific number and then stick to that number. You need to peruse all the documentation, you need to peruse all the leases. You know, at the end of the day, an auction is an unsuspensive transaction. So on the fall of the hammer, or once the auction's completed, it's an unsuspensive transaction. So you are committed to the actual price that has been knocked down. So it's not a case of having to do a due diligence after an auction or getting your ducks in a row or speaking to your bank manager thereafter. It's an unsuspensive transaction. It's a cash buy there and then. So that is what I'm saying with regard to doing homework.
May I make a comment here, please?
Sure, go ahead, Ariella.
I think you've touched on to something very interesting, and I think where Kim's leading is equally interesting. And I think it's worth making a point that physical auctions, at the end of a physical auction, you're invariably left with a house bid and a bunch of cash, but you don't necessarily have market intelligence. And this is regardless of asset, whether it's property, whether it's mining, whether it's a ship or an aeroplane. When you look at the strength of the online, taking into account the negativity that's gone on in the auction space in South Africa, what is quite incredible that certainly sellers whereby you're looking at financial institutions as examples, they're looking for transparency, they're looking for controls and measures as well as auditable tracking. And what the online platform offers you in the auction space to both the seller and the buyer is a higher level of integrity of the system, so that at the end of the auction you actually have a track record down to the second of a second of every bid that was made. So it's leaving you both with market intelligence and factual results, and I think a peace of mind for the buyer as well as for the seller. And I think that's certainly something that both Kim and myself has seen in the current space and what we're seeing in the online auction platform.
And how much are these online platforms actually being used? Are they a popular option at the moment, or are they still picking up?
Where I can talk from our side, it's actually been incredible. We specialize in disposing of assets, for example, from Anglo America, Lonmin, Diesel Power, Xstrata, the likes thereof. And what they're looking to do is free up working capital and boost balance sheets, which I think pertains also to the banks with property. So it's quite a generic thing. And what we've actually found is if I look at our last 2 auctions alone, we've done in excess of 50 million rand, of which ranging between 50 to 71% have been international sales. So it's gaining huge momentum. And I think the global outreach, you're no longer limited to geographic borders and time zones. Suddenly people, the downtime of being out of an office by decision makers is reduced. And like Kim accurately said, your system is powerful if you can provide maximum due diligence to people. It's bringing them that information at the click of a button online, and they can then go and inspect the physical asset just to validate the information you have for further confirmation of what they're about to bid on. But now their bidding can actually take place behind their desk at a click of a button, wherever they're situated. We recently had a Canadian buyer on a mine in Venezuela bidding on an auction in South Africa. I mean, that's a perfect validation.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to touch on that issue of, do the research. I think if we look at the economic recession, one of the things it has taught us is to how do we make our money go further, and that means finding alternative ways to acquire assets. And I think that buying things like property on auction is one of those alternative ways. But like we said, it may not be for the faint-hearted. Therefore, doing your research is critically important. We often say that when you buy stuff on auction, it's sold voetstoots, which means as is. So for example, before you buy a house, one needs to ensure that they actually go and look at the houses, are happy with the condition, so that if there are any repairs, they can actually stomach those repairs, and go and find out if that house doesn't currently have any people living in it, because there's been occasions where you buy a house and there's people living in it, and you have to pay lawyers' fees to actually get those people out or have them evicted. Yep. And once that hammer goes, it's all up to you, and you can't go back on a winning bid. It's as binding as ever.
So let's look. I mean, Kim, would you say that's one of the downsides of buying a property online, that you can't in fact inspect or can't necessarily, feel, see, walk through the property, especially if, for example, you are a Canadian buyer and you're looking to buy a South African property online?
Well, I think from GoIndustry, Dovebid's perspective, we're a listed entity on the NASDAQ. So being listed, it definitely adds credibility. We do most of the auctions for the Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies. With regard to advertising, the media, the marketing of specific properties, we give a 6-week process where people have the opportunity to travel to view the properties, to do the due diligence, etc. With regard to us being a listed entity, all the information is basically stipulated and accurately loaded onto the website. So the site diagrams, the leases, the IRVN, photographs, etc. So from a credibility, from an efficiency perspective, everything is literally visible on the website. If people want to fly across from overseas to view the properties, that's well within their responsibility. But whatever details we're given by the financial institutions or any of the listed companies that we're working for, that information is correct and loaded correctly on our website.
Just one question. Can one request a copy of the contract from the auctioneer so that you can actually look at
Absolutely.
it and see if you'll be happy with it?
Absolutely. Loaded online for overseas buyers as well as traditional buyers are the documentation pertaining to the property, the information packs, the site diagrams, the leases, every single minuscule detail which we have pertaining to every property, be it distressed, be it a liquidation, be it a sequestration, be it a deceased estate, be it commercial or residential. Every single piece of information is loaded on the website and it's freely available 24/7. So somebody sitting in Australia where the time change is different, they can go online 24/7 and view all the information. We do on-site auctions as well, but with regard to the online capabilities, we are totally available too. So via cell, via email, you know, it's not that people are just engaging with a computer. We are totally available to assist and accommodate people from overseas or within South Africa as well that are interested in any specific property.
Ariella, let's look at the value of auctions for sellers specifically. I mean, in the property space, what really stands out right now in light of the economic context we're looking at as the benefit to sellers to go the auction route?
I think it definitely makes a lot of sense, and I think the biggest thing that you want is what an auction allows is it allows transparency, it allows monetizing of assets with speed to market. And I think those are three key things. So when you are a seller, whether you're a financial institution or any form of listed company, you are going to be held accountable for your actions. By going the auction route, what you are doing is making information public, you're making access to that information widely available. It is no longer behind closed doors to the select few. And I think that has definitely been found favorable to sellers. The other aspect of an auction is there is no ceiling to the price achieved. So when that asset, be it a property or anything else, goes onto the auction floor, it is free market supply and demand. And if that supply of that asset is limited, because like we were talking about ideal blue chip commercial properties, you're going to have a lot of people all vying for that asset. From a seller's perspective, they know that they're going to maximize the return based market demand, and thereby they are not being dictated to by a buyer in an out-of-hand or private treaty offer, but they're putting it out on a public platform and saying, let the best man or woman win.
Kim, I'd just like to touch on the financing aspect. How should buyers on auction prepare from a finance perspective? Do they go through the same process as they would with a normal purchasing transaction?
Well, from a lead time point of view, that's why we give between 4 and 6 weeks prior to the actual auction day taking place. So people have got sufficient time to get their funding in place, to do a sufficient due diligence, to speak to their financial managers or their bankers that they're 100% prepared. In the event it's a commercial property giving a specific yield, they need to know how high they want to go. If they've been given funding on a property to 10 million, then they've obviously been given the go-ahead from their bankers to bid up to that specific level. If they exceed that level, then they need to know on the actual auction day that the level of the price that's knocked down is the price that they need to pay. So it's all about being savvy, it's all about being organized, it's all about being prepared on the actual auction day. As Ariella mentioned, you know, there is no ceiling to the auction mechanism of sales. So if there are 5 or 6 people vying for a specific property based on a fantastic yield, then 9 times out of 10 the price is going to escalate further than the actual reserve that the owner is wanting.